2, 1. 1. Yep.
Hi, good evening.
Hang on. Just hold on a minute. Yeah, you're still. I'll tag you in. Hold on a minute. All right. Good evening, folks. I think we are good to go. I'm on standby with this lovely lady all the way from Malaysia, Deeppa Ravindran. Welcome to the show, Deepa. We are
Thank you,
uh,
Charit.
a minute earlier than scheduled, but I think it's always better to be a little earlier than wait right on time. It's what do they say? Early bird gets the worm. Just that.
Yeah,
Good to have you on the show,
thank
folks.
you.
If you're listening in, Deepa is an activist, social worker. She's based in Malaysia. She has done enormous amount of work around the globe, educating people and telling them, making them aware the ills of the use of pesticides in all forms, and the adverse effects of pesticides on people and especially on children. And Deepa had been globetrotting all over the world. She's a very tough lady to get hold of. Deepa, first of all, thank you very much for coming on the show. I know that you are a very busy person, and on a Friday night in Malaysia, you guys are 2.5 hours ahead of Colombo.
That's
On
right.
a hot evening in Colombo, it's extremely hot over here at the moment, and also that at the end of the week, and people are just settling in. But though it is not the best time for us to go on air, but because of the time difference, I decided to get you online at this time. Sorry for the inconvenience. I know it's late for you, but
No
so glad to have you on the show. Deepa, as I told you before, offline, I told you that this is your show, this is your moment to shine. And I know that, the people have been talking about this, the role that you'll be playing. It's just the being like, like lots of people have been talking about it, but that everybody wants to eat healthy, be healthy, do healthy things, but the awareness that not many people know what is happening, what we consume, and what sort of the substance that go into the agricultural products that we consume, and especially what we give it to the children, and also the effect that it can have on the environment, and all sorts of, from insects to birds to what it does to this world, and the role you are playing to make it a better world for the children tomorrow, and just the role that you are playing overall. To start off, how you started, and I understand that you work for a NGO, Pan Pacific. And let's start off saying how you started, how you got involved in this subject and the work that you're doing. It's over to you, Deepa.
Thank you so much, Charit, for having me. And I think you've given a very good summary as to what the work that we are doing right now in terms of the organization as well. Let me introduce a little bit about my organization. My organization is called Pesticide Action Network Asia in the Pacific, and we are really creating a lot of awareness on the impacts of pesticides in the environment and human health. We also have other courses and other programs where they are issues on land grabbing issues. We also create awareness on farmers' health and also teaching them about agroecology. So we do community mobilizing, training, and the whole works. And we are also one of 5 regional centers globally. So we've got other partners in the US, in South America, Africa, and also Europe. And we are one of the regional centers here in Asia and the Pacific. And yes, we do cover a lot of countries, and we have partnerships in Sri Lanka as well. Just to share with you, Charit, why I was so inspired by the work was because 10 years ago, I had the opportunity to go to Sarawak. And Sarawak is in Malaysia, it's in the rural parts of Malaysia. And the community there was getting very sick. And I was with a doctor called Roby Kianu. He's a very inspiring doctor. And he shared the links between their illnesses that they were experiencing and associated it with the pesticides that is being used. And I was a young girl, I was so inspired by what he said. And also, of course, the executive director of PEN, AP, which is Miss Saro, they both inspired me so much because this work is so much meaningful. And unfortunately, I had the experience in Vietnam where I met a gentleman who lost his nephew because the child accidentally consumed pesticides, and this is something so avoidable. And children don't have to suffer. And when I hear stories about children being poisoned by pesticides, young children, and we are seeing so much of data out there, especially like research from good universities coming out, you do question and you ask yourself why this is going on. And this kind of work really inspires me, and I had the opportunity to meet many different communities and farmers and work with them about sharing the information, and I was very inspired, especially when I go down to the ground to visit rural communities, and the farmers and the voices that you hear from the ground inspires me every day, Charit. So this is the main reason why I'm doing what I'm doing.
Brilliant. It's a nice story, how you got inspired, that's how you got involved and, change the, perhaps, that you academically, really qualified, you probably would have taken another course in your life, but instead that you decided to, do this and, educate the people around the world and doing what you are, it's your passion. That's the, when you said that the how it affected children, the pesticide, that's the use of, that, is it in a form of, the food that they consume, or is it the
Right.
environmental effect that have on the kids, or how does it work?
Okay, so globally, pesticides have been used in for food. It was assumed that there is a need to use these pesticides. So pesticides really was just a background. It was created in World War II to actually kill people. So it was a weapon of mass destruction and war. And after the war ended, many of the companies, especially German American companies, thought, what should we do with these chemicals? They decided to push it to agriculture, telling farmers that they need pesticides. So there's this whole myth going around that pesticides is needed for our food. Um, we are seeing growing research saying that pesticides are not necessary. So what is happening right now is that a lot of pesticides are being used in agriculture and the crops. There's also pesticides used as fumigants in companies. It's also used to control pests and also sometimes to treat wood. Now, coming back to our focus here, which is pesticides in the food, children are exposed to pesticides in various ways. Food because they are young, growing children, and there's also pesticides in the air and also in the water. So one thing about pesticides and why we are so concerned about it, Charit, is because you can't see it, you can't smell it, but we know that there is pesticides in the food and water that we eat and breathe. And children, especially young children and their growing bodies, per unit body weight, they consume more pesticides. And we are seeing that children are particularly impacted and they are vulnerable because their immune system is weak, their brains are developing, their organs are growing. So it's not that easy to kind of stop the impacts of pesticides. Children are more vulnerable in that sense. We are also seeing, Charit, that there's long-term impacts in terms of learning disorders. Parents get very upset when we tell them that there are studies showing there are strong links between IQ levels and pesticides use, and also intelligence and how children are performing. There was a research going on saying that from California, and they found that children who were 7 years old behaving like a 6.5-year-old child because of the impacts of pesticides when they were exposed prenatally. So those kind of things are there. And also there was a classic case in endosulfan in Kerala where children were exposed to pesticides when they were in their mother's womb. And it took a long time, like 20 years, for the government and other resources and research agencies, to understand the links between these pesticides and how it was impacting young children. So overall, there are a lot of impacts on growing children, and parents should be concerned about it.
Excellent. That, what puzzles me, that the children usually don't eat vegetables and stuff like that. So how would the kids get affected by pesticide? Is it the milk that they consume? Is it more environmental, or in the little bit of vegetables that they consume? How do children get affected? Unlike an adult, I can understand that
Yeah.
we eat all kinds of foods, and you can see what's going around in the world. That I'm sure that you are aware of being closer to China and all these viruses spreading across. Just to tell you, like, one of the reasons why I could get you on the show earlier. I'm not saying that I'm Superman or I'm a strong guy or whatever, but I hardly get sick. But this time I got this viral infection. I'm
Mm-hmm.
still, which I got around Christmas time, and I'm still suffering, with the after effects. And what I realized, that these viruses also mutate. That our human bodies can't take it. I suppose when you
Yeah.
start using pesticides, the effect on that maybe the insects, the parasites, whatever, they also they evolve, and they get used to pesticides some point in life. And whereas our human body perhaps not evolving as much as what the others do. I don't know. What do you think about it?
Yeah, it's a very interesting thing, Charit. You're talking about how pest has developed immunity. So what we are seeing a lot of times is that insects are very smart. Nature is very, nature is alive and it's intelligent. So we are seeing that there's a lot of immunity developed by pests because pests are smart. They evolve, and people have to keep spraying more and more pesticides. And there was a study
Exactly.
done in Thailand that found at least one fruit had 20 different pesticides. Now, you would be wondering, why would a fruit have 20 different pesticides? Well, because you see, when the time it was harvested, there was insecticides used on it, and for it to be preserved, there was also, you know, fungicide sprayed on it. So there's so many pesticides just to make sure that one fruit, or like a takali, for an example, looks beautiful, and people are, they don't want disease looking pests, fruits. So, to also beautify the product, sometimes people spray pesticides. So this is a real concern because insects are developing immunity. And now a lot of these pesticides, so you'll be surprised, like 20 pesticides. How is this possible? How was this allowed by the government? The thing is that those pesticides levels sometimes are actually within the normal rate, or like within the minimum rate allowed. But each chemical is registered separately. So for each of the chemical, it would be within the regulation. So technically, you may consume 30 pesticides, but they're all within a certain limit. That limit is acceptable. So that's why it's a major concern. And we are seeing a link between weakening immune system among children. So when they are so much exposed to chemicals, so you see, like one child, before they were born, they might have so many different kinds of chemicals, and it affects the nervous system, it affects their immune system and its cells to bounce back. So if there are viruses, if they are ill, they may get sick. And children in rural areas, especially if they are like in Sri Lanka, we know that there's a lot of agriculture going on. So children are not only exposed to their food, but they're also exposed to the environment, their schools, their homes. So that's why children in rural areas are also, strictly exposed even further compared to urban children as well. So there's the difference between children in the rural areas and children in the urban areas, and how
Now,
they.
at the beginning, sorry, Deepa, the beginning of our chat, you said something very interesting very shortly, and you said that pesticides are not a must. But then
Right.
again, that you are saying that it's allowed by the authorities with certain, that the specifications, which say it's not harmful to the human body, which is again that. So when you say the pesticides are not required. So are we talking about organic food kind of thing? And can we say when we go for commercial sort of food industry, can people go completely organic um, without pesticides? Is that practical?
Yes, there are some growing research and a growing movement, Jared, uh, where organic farmers are growing food without pesticides. We are seeing this across the globe, where communities are financially becoming independent. They are also profiting, making a good profit, and there's also climate change adaptation with these communities. So we can see that there is a very practical growing solution. It's also a long-term solution where farmers can slowly convert back to organic farming. Now, Charit, you will say, oh, organic is special, but previously that's what our grandparents ate. They just ate normal food. They called it normal food. They didn't call it organic food. But back then, I do believe that there was enough food to feed the world. And also, there were FAO reports stating that the problem with the world food supply is not that you need pesticides, but it's because there was not enough food distribution. So food is not being distributed properly. So there's a myth pushed by the industries that there is that you need pesticides to grow food, but we are seeing so many farmers around the world slowly switch to organic farming, and the movement is growing. So that's why we feel that it's a strong myth, and we think that it's a strong myth that pesticides are needed, especially chemical-based pesticides. And I'm not talking about the organic type of pesticides where they are using like chili and galanga. Those are organic pesticides which are beneficial for the farm, but it's just really a myth, Charit, that pesticides are needed. And this is what our PAN and our partners strongly believe.
So there again, you said it again that you said that it's a myth. So you are saying that pesticides are not needed in farming. That you can go completely organic, and we can control all these the insects and the pests and whatever you call it, blister blights, and what the nature has to do. Everything
Right.
can be controlled 100% organic. Is that what you're saying?
Yes, we are seeing a lot of farms using 100% organic, or basically homemade products. They are relying less on chemical based fertilizers. They are making their own fertilizers like compost, and they are also making their own homemade pesticides. So we see it at small scale farming, but we can also see that there's a growing movement where big farms are slowly converting to organic food. So it's very much possible, and we have many case studies that we can share with you later on, and the viewers, that there are good case studies globally and in Asia that it's possible. Even small pockets in Sri Lanka, where our partners are working with farmers, we are seeing that yes, it is quite possible to switch. It's a long-term
Great.
strategy. It's going to take some time, but it's definitely possible.
Great. What you're saying is okay. I mean, that's great news. I mean, I'm as a former athlete, not at my age. I'm still trying to do bits and pieces. Whenever I can. You know, I'm very conscious of what I eat, and then since of late, you know, I'm I'm pretty careful, what I put into my body when it comes to food. But when it comes to beverages, it's a completely different, it's a different story. We'll talk about it later. But what I'm saying is, if natural things can be used in control of all these the insects and pests and all that, why do we have to pay a premium on organic food? Is it a marketing thing, or is it the same in Malaysia? What's going on?
Oh, it's really complicated. First of all, we feel that there needs to be subsidies for organic food. So now we understand, like for Malaysia, for an example, there is subsidies for pesticides. So if farmers use pesticides, there is subsidies for that. If farmers use chemical-based fertilizers, there's subsidies for that. Now, the first thing is support. I think farmers need more support from the government to switch to organic farming, and that's why it's very expensive. And initially, when you convert, sometimes it's labor intensive, and that's why there are more costs involved. But if we see it in the long run, I think with enough awareness and support, we can definitely reduce the cost. Like for example, in the past 10 years, like we used to import a lot of organic apples from the US, but now we have apples from Australia coming in, and it's much cheaper. And now in Malaysia, we see in the markets, local farmers are growing organic food. Like previously, there was a lot of expectations to bring in food from the US to come in, and that's why they have the special certificate. But now farmers are slowly being trained. As they are being trained, the price of the organic food is also dropping. So that's why we are seeing a drop. And I also think that there's a lot of other practical reasons. They said like food is your medicine. Many times, cost of healthcare is so expensive, Charit, and you as a pro athlete need the best kind of nutrition in the world. And we are also seeing that healthcare is rising, and it's just best to be as organic as possible, as much as possible. And I'm also seeing one of the things, practical things that people could do is that they could have like a shopping list and kind of like mark out what are the things that they eat commonly. So if children are eating a lot of rice, and if you are consuming a lot of tea, I know Sri Lankans love their tea, is to find substitutes to replace that bit by bit. I think it's a long term kind of strategy. But if you look at it like how you can do it best, like slowly, bit by bit, change and find solutions, that would be good. And coming back to children, I think like if our diets are concerned, like children eat a lot of rice, and sometimes they are also eating fruits, and they are also having milk from their mother. So we definitely encourage breast milk because it's the healthiest kind of milk. But just try to see if kids' food, like if children are below 7, try to make sure that they eat as organic as possible, as much as possible, because their brains are developing, and they are young children and they are pretty exposed to many toxic chemicals. So that's why we try to encourage young children. But in Sri Lanka, we are seeing like companies like Cargill Shopping, Charit. I think there's a Cargill Shopping Center
Yeah,
that
yeah,
sells
it's a
organic.
yeah, popular supermarket. Yeah,
Yeah, and I think they are taking in more organic food. We are also seeing like some of our partners through one of the UNDP programs supply vegetables to Cargill supermarket. So that's an excellent way. So I think with more support, Charit, definitely the prices have reduced, because in Malaysia we're definitely seeing that. Yeah.
yeah, it's brilliant. I mean, yeah, I think that I see more and more. It's just apart from just one supermarket chain. There are like we have a few other supermarkets that are coming up, and I see more and more organic kind of food coming in. But it's just at the moment it's confined to uh, just the fruits and the vegetables. What about that in Sri Lanka people consume a lot of meat, and especially chicken and stuff like that, and the kids do eat a lot of
Yes, right.
poultry stuff. So how does that work? Does this pesticide thing? I'm sure that that's in the meats that we consume as well.
Yeah, so some of the things that through our partners and what we have recommended is to eat organic free range chicken as much as possible. Chicken that's growing wild. We have kampungs here, like rural villages, so we call it kampung chicken, but
What chicken?
we call it kampung chicken.
All right, okay, right.
They call it village chicken, but chicken that's grown, free ranging chicken. We try to encourage, something that's natural as possible. Try to reduce the antibiotics, because we are seeing a growing antibiotic resistance as well, and that's why sometimes people do fall sick, and then there's a lot of other health complications. But chicken that's also eating organic food, it's kind of important, because pesticides can stay in the environment for a long time. So pesticides can go through different food chains. So fish has pesticides, and you consume them, you will have pesticides as well. So what you eat, you are what you eat at the end of the day. And there's also like bioaccumulative effects of these pesticides that accumulate for a long time. So that's why even the eggs that we eat, children eat eggs. Try as much as possible to get organic eggs or free ranging eggs. Charit, what was useful for me was that I went to see the farmer that grew my food, and he's in the highlands, like Cameron Highlands, and I think in Sri Lanka we have Nurwara area, I believe.
Yep,
Yeah.
yep.
So we also understand that there's a lot of pesticides in Nurwala area, the vegetables there. But what I did was that we went to visit the farmer that was growing the food, and we had a relationship with him to understand how he was growing food. And it was also kind of a field trip where kids were part of it, like so teachers can have um, excursions, and they can see those things. And the kids got really excited, and when they saw how their food was being made, they got excited. So sometimes we really need to to understand how our food is being processed. And when I see all the kind of chemicals that is being sprayed on our food, I do get frightened, and I will always think about, the kind of food that I eat every day. So do I want to support an organic farmer, or do I want to support someone who's spraying pesticides? So that's one thing. And I also see that teachers play a big part. I think parents play a big part as well. They can organize children, and children can also have school gardens. Charit, I was just thinking about it. I've seen many school gardens growing up, and kids, they are energetic bunch. Once they are motivated, they will definitely start being proactive with their food. So I think it's just kind of like maybe a shift where children can be more involved in producing food and in cooking. And it can be like a family time, like having a home garden, for an example, and children growing their own food, having parents grow it with them. It's a whole like a family activity as well. So I think it's just kind of changing perceptions. What do you think?
Brilliant. What you're saying is, basically now after having spoken to you after this chat, now first thing I'm going to do, I'm going to, as a kid, I used to grow my own vegetables in my back garden, and with, growing up, and I just completely that given up. And as kids, I think we all had that, the closeness to universe and growing our own food, and which we have completely moved away. And that's the good things are forgotten. I think best thing is to go back. At least you know what you're growing. That what you're eating. I think that's the way it should be. If everyone can, just uh, I know that Kuala Lumpur can be congested as much as Colombo, and perhaps certain people don't have the privilege of growing their own vegetables. But talking to some of my friends, overseas, like in other countries, people have started living in apartments and stuff like that. They have started growing vegetables in their own balcony, and just day-to-day stuff. I think that's the way forward. But I thought, Deepa, that you had never been to Sri Lanka. Have you been to Sri Lanka before?
Yes, I have. I was very lucky. I was in Negombo, and we had a training for women who were unfortunately affected by the war in the north. And we also had some women farmers from Colombo, and also from Kandy, Sri Lanka. And we had a women's leadership training because we felt that leadership is very important, especially for women, to empower them to take action. And some of the women farmers have gone back and they have started their own organic farms. They are also part of an ongoing Women in Agroecology, which is a support for a broader perception of like organic food. Um, but you see, like leadership is very important. So I do think that women have such a key role in terms of how they support the community. So I think that farming is not just like in isolation. I think that's very important to empower rural communities to grow organic food and support agroecology based principles. So when women are empowered, like we have seen through our partner Bikal Pani, we've seen that women, like 50 women who are growing their own food, and we're also seeing it in Moragala, Charit, if I'm
Yes,
pronouncing.
yeah, Munaragala, yes.
Yes, and these women who are empowered by trainings through our partners and also on their own have started to grow food organically. But what's the most important thing, Charit, is that they are doing it for themselves, for their health improve, because we notice that farmers who spray a lot of pesticides, they do get sick. And often because they are so poor, they are economically impoverished, they can't afford healthcare in the long run. So we see that in the long term, women are becoming healthier by growing safer food. But when they have extra, they want to support their community, and the women are so excited, so empowered, that they have actually started their own market. So they are actually supporting their own community there and their own children. So when women are inspired, they can do really great things. So that was my good
Excellent. So what
experience in Sri Lanka.
brilliant, nice story. So you are saying that that they are rehabilitating these unfortunate ladies who are affected by the war, and you are teaching them to grow their own food. So at the moment they're just doing within a community, but they are not doing it commercially at the moment. Is that what you're saying, or they are not
Oh, these
going?
were like separate sets of training, Charit, but overall, that's the real goal of our partner Vikapani in Sri Lanka. And they have been doing that for many years, for more than 20 years. So we are seeing positive impacts of leadership trainings at different levels for these women.
brilliant. I'm thankful on behalf of my country and the work that you have initiated in my part of the world, and having seen the progress in Malaysia in a very short space of time. How far your country has come. Someday that we can get somewhere close to that, and that's evolving. That's one of the reasons why I wanted to feature you in my program, and to see that the ladies like you, the amount of work that you do to inspire others, and just made a career out of what you do. It's brilliant. And you mentioned Noor earlier.
Yeah.
When you went to Noor, did you go to Noor earlier?
No, this is reports from our partners saying that there are insecticides and toxic pesticides used to grow vegetables. So this is what we understand in Urwal area. But I have not been there. I would like to go there someday if I have the
The
chance.
reason why I asked you that, as a country, that our economy was based a few years ago, before the garment industry became huge back in Sri Lanka. We our mainly on our crops, which is tea, rubber, and coconut, and we
Mm-hmm.
were number one the world's tea exporters, until one of my partners who are like supporting my show is based in Kenya, and I also worked in Kenya for a while, and they have become instantly, like over a very short period of time, their tea globally, they are massive. That in a way that it's a new industry. So because their soils are much greater than ours, the type of plants they use are better than ours, so their yields and the crops are much higher. And but in Sri Lanka, that we are struggling to maintain that our crops. They are all because of the soil erosion, because of various other factors. So my question to you, and can they completely go off using pesticides? And are people using pesticides as like a quick fix, that the results are quicker? And when you go organic, does like it's time consuming and it's more painful, and how does it work? It's quick money. How does it work?
Okay, so there are several things here, Charit. I think first, you see what you are experiencing, or what Sri Lanka's agricultural community is experiencing, is a decrease of soil health, and there are links showing that the pesticides are impacting soil. So when you use pesticides, there's a lot of chemicals that kills a lot of microbes. You need worms. You need, like, the soil is very much alive, and you need
Yep.
these microbes to kind of support. So there's a whole ecosystem in farms, and when you do that, in the long run, you are killing the soil. So good news, there are ways where you can increase the soil health through various means. So there are cases where people are rehabilitating the soil. So even the soil kind of has to go for to the hospital and get better. So there are ways to
Yep.
kind of do that. And then yes, their labor is reducing. You can see that there are massive shifts in the world economy, where people are prefer to go to more urban or corporate jobs and leave farming, because farming is not seen as something new or modern. But we are seeing that if a growth or a shift of young people, youth, parents, mothers, who are very inspired to change that, Cherry, because we still need to have the kind of hope where we need to see how we can grow food naturally. If not, food might be grown by hydroponically, and we don't know what's the long-term impacts of growing food in a very artificial way. There could be impacts, so we just need to be cautious, or use a precautionary principle in doing that. Labor is definitely a problem. So when we are seeing many countries are facing, I know, the consequences of using pesticides, but there are methods. There's new sciences where it supports the rehabilitation of soil. Did I
Because
get?
as you said, now we have seen the long-term effect on our soil, as you rightly said, that that's basically the tea plantations are dying. Probably that's over a period of time, that the amount of pesticides that we have used over a period of time. So now we can see the consequences. Now my issue is, like, it has never stopped. So like periodically you have to perhaps the quantities of pesticide that have been used, it has not
Mhm.
decreased, but it has increased. So
Yeah,
it's a never ending thing. And
that's
now
it.
going organic, Now, will the parasites too will evolve, and in how much of organic, that's I know it's a vicious cycle or a circle, and that can like organically also that you could evolve.
Yes, so what we are seeing is that there are, especially in vegetable gardens, there is a natural pest and predators. So we have what they call a IPM, or integrated pest management system, where people need to study the signs of what's going on in their own vegetable garden or their own farm. Then we can see how there is some kind of balance. We have seen tea plantations, organic tea plantation, in a smaller scale, not at such a large scale. In a smaller scale, I think it's
Yep.
much more manageable. And there are other organic methods. There are alternatives available, where first of all you need to study and understand what kind of soil there's there, what kind of pest predator relationships are there, and whether you can use other forms of organic chemicals that is kind of less toxic, much less toxic than the petroleum based pesticides that's currently being used. And I think people should aim to you know pay a bit of more premium to get organic tea or something like that, because my concern is that we know that there's a lot of glyphosate being used in tea in Sri Lanka now. The government tried to ban it, but because of economic reasons, they have reintroduced glyphosate, because then you will compete with the global market. That's what they were saying. This is a real concern, because if you are consuming tea 3 times a day on average Sri Lankan, it's a concern, because in the long term, these chemicals will accumulate in your body. So I would say try as much as possible to support, or to slowly switch bit by bit, or find some other form of herbal tea to support that, or other kind of fruit teas or flower teas or herbal teas to substitute as much as possible. So it is
At the moment it is a niche market, and we do organic tea in a very small scale compared to the amount of tea that is being exported commercially, what we call Ceylon black tea, which is not organic. But as I said, as we spoke earlier, that the organic teas, still it's a niche market, and very few people can afford it. So we got herbals coming in, and I suppose it's a growing market. In time to come, the people will you will see more and more going that way. My next question to you is: I know that palm oil is probably Malaysia is one of the
yes,
biggest palm oil exporters around the world.
right.
Have they started like going more organic, or they are still on this on using chemicals?
Oh, they are still using chemicals. Recently, they have banned the very toxic paraquat pesticide, and that's also, after 20 years of us campaigning for it. Well, it's a long process, and they still do use a lot of pesticides for the ground, herbicides to clear some of the weeds that grow between the palm oil plantations, and they do, we understand, spray on the fruits. Again, in a small scale level, I think it's manageable. I think due to labor, they are spraying these pesticides. Again, Pan AP and our partners take the position where we don't need pesticides in these farms, but it's very difficult to convince or to change the minds of large plantation owners and companies or corporate companies that have different kind of agenda and are a bit more profit driven. But we are seeing there are case studies around the world globally where palm oil is grown without toxic chemicals. So it's possible. It's just the willingness and the political will, Jared, to make these changes.
Are you sure? My next question I was going to ask you: how would the companies who are marketing pesticides, all sorts of, massive, it's like I mean, I don't want to mention any names, certain products that I have seen, in the world market. These companies are pumping mega bucks and advertising, and, to expect bigger, larger, better crops. You need to use our products. Now my question is, I think you work for an NGO setup, and you do a lot of work with United Nations as well. So
Mhm.
isn't there how do you face the global challenges, like coming from the marketing side of it, and the good and the bad side? I mean, I'm not saying what is good, and I'm not, it's very controversial. I'm not here to say what is good and what is bad. But I'm sure that globally there's going to be at some point there's going to be resistance, because the people who have been in this in the manufacturing of pesticides going to resist you at some point. That they're going to go out of it. And how do you balance that? In what you do.
Charit, it's a long-term strategy. It's a long battle. One of the things that we do is that when we are doing documentation of people's health impacts, we make sure that it is systematic, and we also try to create awareness among farming communities that they need to resist the growing of using of pesticides. So even though there is a lot of companies coming in telling them what to do, they need to be aware. So awareness is really key, Charit. And how do you fight these companies? It's always an ongoing battle. Small NGOs like us definitely need a lot of support. We need support from the consumers and the government as well to recognize these alternatives. Now, there's a lot of research and data that's already available. So those are the things that we do. So I think consumers play a huge role, governments also, and we really need a lot more support to kind of spread the message. And if your viewers are willing, to share the information from us, to gather more funds to support, any small things, we really need more support. And there's also like petitions, ongoing petitions to create awareness. So if people get together, I think we can create a lot of wonders, Jared. But the giants are big, but one battle at a time.
I get you. I was going to ask, like, in certain industries, that, some of the companies that say that, you shouldn't be talking, about these things on air, but say tobacco industry and
Mhm.
people, there are lots of, they have put the ill effects of, tobacco on a pack that you buy. And has any of these companies who are producing chemicals, have they made any initiative to move away from chemicals and more towards natural products? And have they, like, it's, as you said, it's a long-term thinking. Have they made any effort?
I think there is stronger regulations in the world, but despite stronger regulations and despite many of the effort that these companies do, we are still seeing many countries in, especially Asia, where farmers and communities are getting sick. So there's a long-term impact of what they are doing. So even though there are certain steps being taken, people are still getting sick. You and me are being poisoned every day. So I think it's very important that we resist it. And some of the times, Charit, what makes me very passionate or very frustrated about this issue is that they'll tell you to use protective equipment, PPE or personal protective equipment for the farmers when they are spraying pesticides. Now, Asia and Malaysia is so hot. How can we use such protective gear in such a hot environment? It just doesn't make sense.
Not
So in a
practical.
way that it's very difficult to protect workers, it's difficult to protect from chemical effects, because chemicals know no borders. They penetrate your skin, sometimes without your permission as well. So you and I have a body burden of thousands of chemicals in our body, and we didn't ask for it. So I do understand that some industries have taken steps. We definitely support a lot of new organic industries that are coming in strongly, where they have bottled neem. They've bottled neem and chili combinations. We have seen that in the markets, and we definitely encourage families who have young children to spray like citronella instead of other toxic chemicals that come in a arson spray can. So if you make your own uh, pesticides, that would be good, like to ward off mosquitoes. And there are many other companies out there that are coming up with a more organic based pesticides, or ways to ward off chemical pests. So we definitely support those kind of industries. I think those industries are worth the mention, Charit, and worth looking into.
Excellent. I mean, do you still, like, that you mentioned that you do some work, in Sri Lanka? Is it an ongoing thing? Just, do you still work very closely and liaise with the Sri Lankan, the others, who are doing similar kind of work? What's the kind of response you get from Sri Lanka to your line
Yes.
of your line of work?
through our partners, we through Bika Pani, and we have one partner HDO in Kandy. Definitely, there's a much more growing awareness. So there's a lot of training for farmers on agroecology, organic-based farming for women. There's also a lot of support through our partner in Kandy for workers who are working in rubber and oil, tea plantations in Sri Lanka. So definitely, the work of our partners HDO and Bika Pani is ongoing. We are very excited to share with you that in August, September, we are having a cycling tour where it's called the
What?
Pedal
A cycling? A
Cycling
cycling
Tour.
tour?
That's right.
Okay, all right.
All over Asia, it's called the Pedal Against Poisons, and we are accumulating in Bonn sometime in September, Bonn, Germany, where there's a big UN meeting going on. It's called CICEM, where they are going to discuss the future of this particular chemical framework. So a lot of our partners are cycling simultaneously around Southeast Asia and also Asia and globally as well, to create awareness on the impacts of pesticides. And we are having a big event. So I hope that people will join in. We are cycling, I think, from Colombo to Kandy.
Oh,
Yeah.
brilliant! And I was going to ask you whether Sri Lanka I was going to ask, like, are we one of the participants, and what kind of response that it has. Cycling is a growing community in Sri Lanka, and I can see that lots more and more people into cycling, and I'm sure it's going to be. What did you say? Pedal for? What's the
Pedal
theme for?
against poisons.
Pedal against poison.
That's right.
Oh, brilliant! That's that I will, in my own little way, I will support your cause, and that's
Thank you.
and see whether we can take it to the next level. Let me see whether I can get hold of a bicycle, and I'll be a part of it. That I may not be
Excellent.
able to pedal all the way to Kandy, but at least halfway through, and
And that would
just to give you a hand, get a bunch of guys, and that'll be good fun to be a part of like a great cause, and that's for our future, our children's future, and it's a global future. It's brilliant, and I wish you well. And as I said before, as a country, that we are becoming more and more aware of eating healthy, changing lifestyles, more conscious about organic food, and intermittent fasting, and all kinds of people have realized, like as we discussed over our conversation, what you are is what you put in. And if you eat well, and you probably that you can make less visits to your doctor, and which is very costly. The medical is becoming costlier by the day, and doctors are very happy to see people eat unhealthy. Unfortunately, just not a nice thing to say, but that's the truth. I mean, that. But more, that I must tell you that now I just started doing a coaching stint, and I just got two people, overseas players, playing for my team, and when you look at their eating habits, they eat very simple food for athletes, just dal, very basic chapatis. The guys are fit. I mean, I don't see any problem. There is no difference. That's for me also. It's a learning process. The meat eaters and the vegetarians, perhaps I see that the vegetarians are becoming fitter, and then the meat eaters, and whole there's a shift completely. I'm doing certain things to my body to see how I react, and I feel that the less meat I eat, I become, my body feels better, and the less I eat, especially now. I used to eat like 3-4 meals a day, but now I perhaps will have one meal a day, and very consciously, like eat more vegetables, and less meat, and my body functions brilliantly. I think this is the whole eating 3 meals a day, and hogging away, and filling your stomach is not going to do you any good, and especially as you said, if you don't know what you're putting in, the chemicals accumulate in your body, and you end up being sick. That's simple as that, isn't it?
That's right. Absolutely. Yeah. What you eat is affects your health. It affects your mind, and I think being conscious about what you're eating is very important and key to your energy levels and your long-term immune health as well.
Now, now they see, like, unlike in Malaysia, that you have different communities. We also in Sri Lanka, we do have different communities, but our lifestyles are more or less, that very similar. I mean, just there is no big difference from a person who comes from Jaffna up north, a person who comes from down south. We all have same kind of eating habits, but you have like a different, like a big Chinese community, big Malay community, big Indian community. That if I may ask you, like, who would more health conscious, within those three communities compared to comparatively?
I think it's very subjective. It's mostly communities that are aware. So we see a lot of communities in the urban areas, and that is Malaysia has a 60% a group of Malays, a 30% group of Chinese, and about 10% of Indians and other races. So we see a lot of communities, especially coming in expats. We also see a lot of urban communities that are kind of more health conscious, I would say. But communities that who have been living in rural areas, they are also very much connected to the farming and traditional practices that they have been using. We see that, like, in certain states, like in Kelantan and Terengganu, they eat a lot of their own fresh vegetables. We call it ulam. I think coming back to vegetables, that's very interesting, because if you eat local varieties, it's much better, because there is a natural pest that's available that can kind of protect those vegetables. So you don't need to use so much of pesticides, is what I'm trying to say. Like, we have our kangkong, which is a spinach, and we see that a
What
lot
do you
of
call
pests
it,
don't
kangkung?
attack it.
What do you call it,
Sorry?
kangkung? What
Yeah,
do
we
you
call
call
it
it?
kangkong.
We say the
Kangkong.
same thing, kangkung.
Yeah, yeah, that's
But
right.
spinach,
Like a
kangkung and
vegetable
spinach is
leafy
different.
kind of thing.
Spinach is something different. I don't think kangkung is not spinach.
No, no, it's like a spinach. So it's
Yeah.
a leafy vegetable, and we have kangkong, and we also have uh, the local spinach. Sorry. So we see that there are less pests that attacks these vegetables, as opposed to something that's kind of foreign, like tomatoes, like takali, and cabbage. So if it's local, then there's just less need for use of chemicals. So try to eat as local as possible. So that's one of the key takeaways, or tips that I would share with your viewers.
I was going to ask you. You have already answered. What are the foods you can easily grow, organically? Like, just you said it. But it's very interesting to me. You said takali.
Yeah.
So that's the same. For tomatoes, we say the same thing. Is it from Malay, that the language you
Oh, that's
in?
Tamil Malaysian. So
Oh,
here we
yeah. Okay.
have tomatoes. So basically, for us, tomatoes are not Malaysian. It's exported from overseas. But we also see that even if they grow it in the highlands, these tomatoes tend to be more intensive, more chemically intensive. So you need to be mindful where these vegetables are coming from. Carrots and cabbages, they are not native to Asia, and sometimes may have more you know pesticides on them.
I can see certain people, already, counting on the pedal against poisons. That already people, just showing interest. And there are idiots, who are, always, when you have a show, some idiot will come on, talk rubbish, which is, since my show is a public show, it cannot be, sometimes, it's uncontrollable. But I'm trying to do something good, and, I try to keep it open for the public. And, you get, wherever you go, you get the good, the bad, and the ugly. I deal with the bad and the ugly at the end of my show, so I don't get involved in, the guys who come and talk rubbish. That's, I leave the ripraps alone. That, I don't I don't want to talk about it, just to spoil my evening.
Yeah.
That's always, that there's always, one idiot will come and say something stupid, and, just trying to, that's, anyway. I just want to wish you, Deepa, all the very best in what you do. What's your
Thank
future?
you.
Like, you're gonna be remain in this field, and you're gonna continue with your work until one
Yeah.
day you see that the world is free of pesticides, and where will you go from here?
I think I'm definitely passionate about the issue of how children are impacted by chemicals. So definitely see how the best way to support children and also see how women's health can be improved. I'm always very interested in making sure community health is a priority. So it's always been my passion, and hopefully I see that something in the future for me as well.
All right, I've been talking to you for almost like for an hour now. Just we didn't feel the time passing, and that's very interesting. And I wish that next time when you're in Sri Lanka, and please keep us informed, and that the uh, whatever support that you need through, as I said in my own little way, through my show. I'll be very happy to help you, to carry on with your work, because I'm sure that it's more than it's not anything commercial that you do. It's just like that's something that, as you said, if you're passionate about what you do, and that's you you had an experience that you witnessed, that something that like what happened in your part of the world, and how it inspired for you to take on this course in life, and you carry on. And just before you wind up, what's the work I know that you did certain work with UN, and you
So
do
I was
like.
I engaged in, I was invited for some of their meetings to participate. And this is under the SICOM framework, which is under UN environment. I also did some training with some division, some special unit within the UN environment, where I looked at educating customs officials and other officers who are working in enforcement. So I did some training for custom officials and also enforcers in terms of how to reduce pesticides and to look at the impacts of pesticides and human rights. So making that link. So I've engaged with several in several meetings and gave interventions in several UN-based platforms.
Great stuff. You were in Germany like last week, right? And I know that you are struggling with the extreme cold in in Europe. And happy to back home. And just I'm sure that the you were there for a long time, right?
I was there for about a week, and this was a workshop on the future of chemicals framework and chemicals management around the globe. I think overly, unfortunately, there's a less interest of people on the impacts of chemicals. So a lot of the agencies are looking at methods and ways to make sure that there are better platforms where civil society organizations and governments and pesticide companies can actually look at better regulations. So a lot of the work that I'm also doing is to share the work that is happening down in the communities um, to different levels in terms of the government levels and also within UN agencies. So kind of taking information from the ground and sharing it up to regulators globally.
Great stuff. And once again, before we wind up, I just want to ask you that I know that it's a local brew that we make out of coconut. It's called toddy. I think you get that in Malaysia as well, which people make it out of the palmara, that the tree.
Yeah, yeah.
Can these
TOD.
pesticides get into? So it's called toddy.
That's right. Can
Toddy. TODY.
Oh my God. It really depends on the farm. There are some shorter coconut trees, I think, where they do spray pesticides on the coconut. I don't know. I've heard some rare cases. I don't want to say anything without verifying. But here's the thing, Charit. A lot of the food, like the roots of the tree, come from the soil. So it really depends on where the coconut was grown. And if the coconut is by the sea, yes, the sea does have chemicals. It has lots of chemicals that's in there. We need to find out what's inside coconut. But we are seeing a lot of food items have pesticides, and people have pesticides because they were born, kind of pre-polluted. So a lot of the, unfortunately, the food chain in the world is kind of contaminated. So not to get too, grim about it, but that's the kind of reality, and at least we try to do something about it end of the day.
Yeah, the reason why I asked you, imagine, like, unlike eating, eventually that goes through, I think, yeah, our bodies have over a period of time I think we are walking chemical factories and our livers and the kidneys working over time.
Right, that's right, unfortunately.
But
Um,
imagine that you're drinking straight up, glass of toddy,
ooh.
full glass of chemical, toxic material in your body, and what it does to your liver, and the effect of it.
Yeah, yeah. I think one day we could do some research and to see what kind of chemicals are in toddy. I have not come across any scientific research, so I dare not say with absolute certainty or confidence. But I do know that a lot of times people snack. They don't have the drink alone. They have some other snacks and
True, true, absolutely. That
checkpoint.
keep on piling up poison into your body. The reason why I asked you, it's a Friday night, it's a big night in Colombo. So if
All
anyone
right.
listening to us who's going out, I mean, the very few people drink toddy, but they'll be drinking so many other things. Since my show is called A Drink with Charits, I always, my parting message to all those people out there, be sensible. That I've been talking to a lady who's been talking about what you put into your body. Make sure that it's chemical free. That keep it natural as possible. I think that's the word that you're giving into the world, and for the parents, and to be like, I'm just trying to cap it up in what you said, that to be conscious of what you feed your children and keep
That's
it
right.
simple, and the less complicated the what you consume, easy on the body, easy on your pocket, less visits to the doctor, and that you don't have to be a rocket scientist to understand that eat healthy, live live cleanly, then you're fine. 90% of your problems are taken care of if you're conscious of what you're doing. That's what I think what you said, Deepa. uh, Deepa, once again, it's a pleasure, and it's great talking to you. It's a privilege having you on my show. And once again, thank you very much. You are my first guest for 2020. That my apologies once more for keep on postponing, because we had several commitments, and last week you were away, and just I had a few other commitments. But I'm so grateful that you came on the show. It's brilliant talking to you. All I can say is that I wish you nothing but the very best in your future endeavors, and whatever help that you need from our side. And if ever you decide to come to this part of the world, we are a great country. I think 2020 we are nominated the #1 travel destination. It's a good place to be. So spread all your friends. I can see your friends commenting, and everybody who's listening out there. Please ask them to come visit us. We have plenty of organic food, not a problem. Yeah. we can feed all you guys without any fears, and a lot of good places to see, to visit, and likewise, that we will someday if we come back to Malaysia, they come and see you. And thank you very much,
Thank you,
and
Charita.
you have a good evening. And once again, and until I see you once more, you take care and keep up the great work.
Thank you.
Thank you, Deepa. It's a pleasure.
Thank you.
Bye bye.
Bye.